Can people hear me okay? Okay, great. Thank you guys for coming. It's Friday afternoon and a very difficult time for all of us, so I appreciate it. Um, this is my first web camp, so so far it's really awesome, even though it's online. And I haven't been able to meet people in person, but it's been very good experience so far. So I'm going to talk about today, is your library website beautiful? Actually, is your website beautiful? Um, as I said, I'm Allie Krogman. I am an engineering librarian at Stanford. And before that, I was an engineering librarian at the University of Illinois. So I've been at Stanford for about a year and a half. And I'm actually going to talk about research today that I conducted at Illinois. So today I want to talk about the user experience assessment of websites, in particular how and why we might want to evaluate the aesthetics of websites. So I'm going to start by discussing the role of usability in user experience design, and I'm going to compare that to the role of aesthetics. And then I'll present on the research study I did at Illinois, which involves individuals in academic library websites. So I'll highlight what I learned from that study, and it might also serve as an example for how you might go about approaching evaluating the aesthetics of other websites. So usability and user experience are very often conflated, but they're not the same thing, and I think it's really important to distinguish the two. User experience is more holistic. User experience design ultimately creates a satisfying product, and a satisfying product is usable, but it's also valuable, credible, desirable, all these other characteristics represented here on the user experience honeycomb. Usability, on the other hand, is more focused. Usability testing and evaluation methods create products that are easier to use and easier to learn. Usability impacts all of these characteristics on the honeycomb, but so do other things, namely look and feel. And I'm really interested in understanding how look impacts the user experience of user interfaces. Someone should count how many times everyone says user during, during this event. Okay, so when it comes to aesthetics, the way that look and aesthetics impacts the experience of user interfaces has been well researched over the past decades. And here are just a couple major impacts that you might be familiar with. Aesthetics impacts how users perceive credibility and trustworthiness of UIs, how they intend to use the UI in the future. And there's also a relationship between aesthetics and usability for some users, for sighted users. Um, Aesthetics has been shown to impact the way that users perceive usability, and kind of the converse has been shown, where usability has also been shown to impact how users perceive aesthetics. So knowing the importance of aesthetics, I wanted to explore methods by which I could start evaluating and improving the visual appeal of library websites. To be entirely honest, there are a lot of ugly library websites out there in the world. I mean, there are a lot of ugly websites out there in general, I think we can all admit, and library websites aren't really an exception sometimes. So I wanted to be able to start a conversation about how we could improve the visual appeal of library websites, because I work in libraries. So I designed a study to help answer these two questions. What makes an academic library website aesthetically pleasing to its users? And how can we start incorporating the evaluation of aesthetics into our user experience study methods? A lot of the user experience study methods out there focus on usability. And in particular, in library and information science, what I see a lot of the user experience studies really focus on usability. So, in order to answer these questions, I decided to interview library patrons and have them compare the aesthetics of academic library websites. So I decided to interview participants because I wanted to have my colleagues hear from the mouths of their own patrons what makes an academic library website pretty and what makes it ugly. So I recruited interviewees. First, I tried to have different branches at the Illinois Library share a social media post. And even though I was offering participants $10 gift certificates, that was largely a failed method. I only had one person contact me, which I mean, one person, yay, that's good, but it didn't really work out. So I ended up setting up study tables at 3 of our different library branches, and that seemed to work better. I ended up getting 19 interviewees that way. So I had each of the participants look at 2 academic library websites, and they were randomly selected from the list of Big 10 Academic Alliance libraries. These are universities in the Midwest and the Illinois University of Illinois Academic Alliance. So it just made sense to use this list. This list is 14 universities, so it was a small enough list to pull from, but the library websites also employed different design methods, so I thought it was a good sample size. I asked the participants to take time to look at the 2 websites, and I instructed them not to click on any links. I wanted to keep the interviews really short and convenient for patrons. And I also wanted them to be thinking about aesthetics, so I didn't want usability to get in the way, like the links or anything of that nature. So after taking their time to look around at the websites, I asked them to indicate which of the ones they found more visually appealing and to try to explain to me as best they could why. And with each participant, I repeated this 2 times. So by the time the interview was up, each participant had seen 6 academic library websites. The interviews lasted between, well, if you've interviewed people before, you know there's a wide range of like people will want to talk to you and not want to talk to you, but they ranged from 5 to about 18 minutes, with the average being around 12. So well, during the interviews, I took notes, but I also audio recorded the sessions by getting permission from the participants. And then I had these interviews transcribed, and I later well, I'm currently using grounded theory methods to explore emerging themes and trends in the transcripts. And grounded theory methods, we could spend the entire session talking about grounded theory methods, but basically they're designed in an attempt to reduce researcher bias. I have familiarity with design. I'm very passionate about design, so I really didn't want the results to be based on my opinions. So the whole study I tried to design in a very, as much as I could, scientific way for that reason, but also because I'm hoping to publish a paper on the results as well. So the theories that I saw emerge revolved around design elements and design principles. So all the ones you see on the screen came up during the interviews and frequently by name. The interviewees were familiar with these design elements and design concepts. The ones that came up most frequently were color, space, and visual hierarchy. So we're going to spend a little bit time talking about each of those things today, but I do want to say that this is an exploratory study in nature. It's qualitative. It's not like the results are statistically significant. It's just to explore different ideas that could be further studied down the road. And I am also still working on writing up my results for the paper. So this is kind of a basic look at what I am seeing, an initial look at what I'm seeing. So color, 16 out of the 20 participants mentioned color. This was the theme that came up by far the most. Maybe because it's that important, maybe it's because it's that recognizable as like color is design. So let's talk about color. Um, Participants used very emotionally charged words when they talked about color, and these ranged from negative to positive. So some of the negative words they used were cold, stark, intimidating, annoying, overwhelming. Some of the more positive words were exciting, interesting, inviting, warm, and soft. And researchers have long studied how colors impact emotion and behavior. So a lot of these findings aren't like novel in this sense, but it's just highlighting that importance. And I think for this, what it did for me is highlight the importance of, oh, I should really think about the color choices I'm making and what emotions and behaviors they could elicit. So when discussing colors, some participants focused on number of colors and some focused on amount of color, which really sounds like the same thing, but it's not. One has to do with number and one has to do with proportion. So many students commented about there being too many colors. So for instance, a PhD student criticized a page and its color usage, and this page used red, orange, yellow, green, blue, white, and gray, and like a whole bunch of different shades of those colors as well. Um, so all the different colors of the rainbow, basically. So students didn't like when the websites were using too many colors, but on the other hand, some students would make comments about how they liked that there were different colors being used. And one undergraduate said he liked several web pages because they used different background colors. But later on, when I was listening and reading the transcripts, I was like, wait a minute, what is this? Like, one student saying this, one saying this, what does this mean? But so I actually looked at the web pages that that student was talking about, and they weren't using a bunch of different colors. They were only using 3, and they were just using them in different ways and using them a lot throughout the design. So there's generally these rules that designers follow around color, and generally color schemes, it's recommended to stick around 3 colors. So that student who didn't like that all of the colors of the rainbow were being used, maybe we should follow the 3 color rule. There's also a rule called 60-30-10, which is talking about the proportion to use color in. So your primary color, 60% of the design should be the primary color, secondary color, 30%, and so on. So I think this example gives me the opportunity to talk about the importance of that rule with my colleagues when it comes to library website design. Another thing that came up was color scheme, and some color schemes seemed more approachable than others. So one color scheme in particular incited 2 very dissimilar opinions. About this color scheme, a graduate student stated that the colors don't seem to be thought out, they don't go together, it's orange, like a coral, blue, and mustard yellow. They just don't seem to fit. But another undergraduate student actually liked this color scheme, and they thought that the library made an intentional decision. They said, usually most libraries try to reduce stress. Blue or nice pastel tones always reduce stress, so that might be something this library is going for. So while this particular color scheme roused different opinions, a lot of libraries used this sort of monotone color scheme where they had one primary color that they used in different shades and then maybe grays and whites. And this always provoked positive opinions. And like I said, this is not statistically significant, and I'm not being recorded as saying monotone color schemes are safer color schemes than contrasting color schemes. But it might suggest that some color schemes are safer than others, more approachable for more users. Before I move on to the next theme, it is interesting to note that the interview participants tried to understand color schemes and colors, whether or not they liked them. So as I previously mentioned, for that blue, coral, mustard yellow color scheme, they both tried to understand the intention behind it. The user who didn't like it thought it wasn't intentional, like they were just thrown together, the library didn't think about it. The one who did like it thought that the library was trying to reduce stress. Similarly, 5 participants noted when websites were using school colors, and they considered this a positive and even forgave color choices that they didn't necessarily like because they knew they were school colors. And so what this suggests to me is that intention matters in design to users and that users think about intentions. And not just with color, this is something I saw throughout the interviews, that they were trying to understand the intention behind design choices and that it was actually impacting their opinion. So I'll move on to the next theme, which is space. 13 participants mentioned space out of the 20. And the participants also used emotionally charged words to talk about space, particularly when they were talking about what they thought was the ineffective use of space. So when too much white space was left on a page, they used words like strange, weird, unfinished, empty. I thought the strange and weird was an interesting example. When not enough white space was left between elements on the page, so when there was like too much material going on, they used words like cluttered, messy, distracting. So participants noted when they thought space that was brought up was not using the margins, which I thought was interesting. This was often brought up as a negative, although one of the participants kind of flipped on me. He saw one's website where they had huge margins and didn't like it and gave that as a reason for not liking it. But later on, when I showed him another pair of websites, he said that he liked a website um, and he liked the way they weren't using the margins. And so I asked him about it, as you're allowed to do in these semi-structured interviews. I asked him, wait a minute, can you explain what the difference is between the first site you didn't like and the second site you did like? And he told me that basically he saw the purpose and the intention, like I was talking about earlier with the second library. He thought that they had done it on purpose. It was an intentional decision not to use the margins, and that's why it was okay. It's very interesting. Additionally, one student pointed out when a library used far less space to convey what they thought was the same amount of information than another library. So that was another example of participants noting when they thought libraries wasted space. Participants also noted when they thought space was not used enough. So comments would range from things like, there's way too much going on, I can't focus, there's too much material on this page, I'm not sure where to go first. Which brings me to my third and final theme, visual hierarchy. So visual hierarchy is a design principle. It refers to the way that things are arranged on a page to imply importance. In other words, what you see first, second, third when you look at a design. And I always like to use the cover of Twilight as an example to explain visual hierarchy. I know, horrible example of a female character, but good example of visual hierarchy in the cover. So if you take a minute and you look away from the screen for a second, and then look back at the cover, you'll notice that the first thing you probably see is that red apple. And then the second thing is probably the white arms and hands. And then maybe third, the title or the author's name. So there's different ways to achieve visual hierarchy. This cover is using color, but you can use it, you can do space, you can do size, and different ways to achieve visual hierarchy. So during the interviews, participants would note when they saw what they considered important, useful items first, second, third on library websites. For instance, one participant liked that they saw a chat instant messenger application right away when they opened a page. And at first I tried to discourage these comments because I thought that they revolved around usability, but then I remembered visual hierarchy. And I realized that it wasn't just about usability, it was about them being guided around the page and that first, second, third. So I stopped discouraging these comments, and in the end, 15 participants brought up visual hierarchy during the interviews. And these comments ranged from ones that seemed more about aesthetics or more obviously about aesthetics. Someone made that guided around the page comment. They liked that they were being guided around the page by the design, which seemed more to do with aesthetics to me. And in other cases, they noticed that they saw first what they wanted to see or expected to see on a library website, like that chat application or the hours or study rooms. It really varied. And that seemed more to do with usability to me, but it was really hard to tease apart these concepts in this case. And I think it serves as an example because this came up in other cases too, where it was hard for me to be like, is this usability or is this aesthetics? And I think in some cases, there are two sides of the same coin for sighted users or for people who are very visually motivated or visual learners, if you will. And it was also hard for some of the participants to focus on aesthetics. Most people could talk about design and they knew what they were talking about using those design elements, words, and design principle words, but there was the occasional participant, one I remember, it was very difficult to get them to try on aesthetics. So my conclusions right now, I'm still working my way through the results section, but what makes an academic library website beautiful besides color, space, visual hierarchy? One thing, the thread that I saw throughout was the intentional design choices really seem to matter. Users seem to think about that and care about it. And something I'm kind of calling baby bear's porridge. I think space helped is a good example. My example for space is a good example of this. That there's kind of this fine line, like with the space thing, there was a fine line between using enough space and not. And then the third is visual hierarchy. So creating a visual hierarchy with design elements, but one that also matches usability and what the user is looking for, so that what they are seeing first and second and third is actually stuff they care about. And my other question was about how do we incorporate aesthetics evaluation into UX design methods? And I think this study was a good example of you can just ask users about aesthetics and what they like and don't like, and most of the users were able to talk about it. And what was my next point? I lost my note. That's okay, we'll just move on. Those are my conclusions so far. So before I open it up to questions to the participants, I wanna leave you with a question, which is your website beautiful? So thank you all. I got through that pretty quick, so we have a lot of time for questions. Does anyone have any?
Should we raise our hands or can we just ask?
Well, you can go ahead and ask.
Okay. Could you talk a little bit more about this idea of intentional design choices? I'm curious if you saw anything that you think was the marker of what made design choices look intentional versus not intentional.
Yeah, that's interesting. This is an interesting study to talk about in general because it's hard to provide examples that don't suggest that the results are statistically significant, if that makes sense. So in writing up the results, it's been difficult, like not exactly saying, look at this specific website for an example. but I really want to do that right now.
Did they have any comments about what they were seeing? Anything that they just said specifically? Maybe I don't know. I think it's hard for me to understand because I assume that most things that are done on a website are intentional as far as the design. That may not be true for 100% of things, but
So
I'd
the
be
one,
interested to know how the users thought about it.
yeah. The one example I had was the color scheme example. Another one, the margin one, they also they also talked about this particular library website that used basically the same font for everything and font size, and nothing was a different size. Um, and they thought that it looked very just thrown together and that they were just putting things on there because they thought they needed to be up on the website. I don't know, does that help? That's another.
Yeah, I mean, sounds like maybe some amount of styling consistency might have been a contributing factor to that. That's good to
Yes,
hear.
some design, some design period, yeah. Some websites were very basic.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Hmm.
Okay, Robert, it's your turn.
Yeah, I was wondering if you came to any conclusions about like design elements or imagery that just doesn't, it's more there for pleasing, aesthetic purposes. Uh, I work in the arts, so we have a lot of imagery that kind of doesn't matter, but it's also somewhat expected in our case. But I'm wondering in a library, what about, was there any reactions to banner images of kids laughing with books in their hands or whatever?
Yeah, oh, and actually this goes to the question that was just posed. This is a great example. So that's actually one of the themes I am including is in my final write-up is images and graphics, because it didn't seem to fall into any one of the design elements or design principles, but people brought up images and graphics a lot. And one thing that I found very interesting was they thought about what the actual content of the images were and would make comments like, why did they use this flower icon? Like, what does that have to do with the library? And same with pictures. Like one website used a great like panoramic view picture of inside the library and students studying. And someone said, oh, they liked that they used that picture that gave them an insight into what the library is like. So that came up frequently, people commenting about why did they use this image, or oh, that's great that they used this image to signify their library. Yeah.
Okay, sorry if I mispronounce your name, but your guest, Pianeta.
This is a little more of a state design question rather than kind of UX. But one thing I was wondering is, in terms of color, do you have any tips on choosing a good palette and like how which colors to use for certain elements? If this isn't, you know, strictly connected to data.
I wonder if you could type the question into chat, because I'm having a really hard time. There's a lot of background noise,
Yeah,
so I didn't really hear all of that.
we'll take the next question, James. And Pianeta, we can take your question offline on the chat.
Hi. I was curious about your summaries of what you learned about the data collection process, the study. How would you modify your study next time? You mentioned some of that when talking to Robert, but have you gathered those ideas together to iteratively improve your study? I caught the first round of iteration was that the bribing people to participate and give you data didn't work, but excellent idea to set up a table at the library. So what are you looking forward to improving next time you make this study?
Yeah, there's a couple things. This study, looking back on it, it's been some time, and sometimes I think about it and say, wow, Allie, you just left out people who are low sighted or not sighted, you know, like this study completely leaves that group of people out. I think I would try to do a study that focuses on both usability and aesthetics, combines those things together, and also feel. Trying to look at it holistically, because that's kind of what I brought up in the beginning, that user experience design is holistic, having to do with usability, look, and feel. So creating study methods that aren't just focused on usability, but I did one completely focused on aesthetics. So I think I would try to combine those things. Other than that, I did not work on the library website at Illinois when I was there, but it was very much in our job descriptions to focus on research. So that's kind of why I designed the study the way I did, where I was looking at multiple websites and looking at this as a broader question. It would be nice to do this with like one particular website in mind and have like some improvements come out of it. I'm trying to think. I'm sure there are more.
That makes sense. I'm curious. At the end of the day, sometimes a question leads to more questions. What were the more questions you found that you have insights into being curious about now?
Ooh, that is a good question. I have to think about that one, to be honest. I've been so focused on the results.
No, that's okay. Sometimes that insight comes later. I mean, it's like the insight that wakes you up in the middle of the night, ding, ding, ding. So thanks
Yeah,
so much. I appreciate it.
yeah. Thank you.
Alexandra, I'm sorry, I realized that the chat was not allowing people to use it. So
Oh,
just wanted to let everybody know that the chat is now functional. So the person who was asking a question earlier can jump in and use the chat again. I do have a question in the meantime. You, Alexandra, you mentioned the visual hierarchy rule of 60, 30, and 10. I'm not familiar with that. Could you go a little bit more in depth on that?
sure. The general idea, and this goes beyond website design and graphic design, interior design, fashion design, that color schemes generally have about 3 colors: primary, secondary, tertiary. Not sure what they call that third one, but that the primary color should take up about 60% of the design. The secondary color should take up about 30%, and that final color should take up about 10%. And in general, there are different ways that people recommend that you use these colors. So for the 10%, a lot of what people use that for their accent color and their highlighting color. So a lot of people will use that 10% color for their call to action buttons. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Anybody has more questions? And feel free to unmute yourself, raise your hand, or ask a question via the chat.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. That's a very basic question. It's more along the lines of someone who is relatively new to design, and sorry if this has been touched on before, but how not to get carried away, as you mentioned, in the aesthetics of it, and really to focus more on usability as opposed to kind of going down the rabbit hole of every shiny new design feature that comes along. Kind of what are the classics and what would be a good starting space to get on board with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for me it helped highlight like what are the important things that users are actually noticing and thinking about in terms of design. Um, I'm not sure if this study actually shows that, or it more shows it could be showing just what they're capable of speaking about. Like I said, the color thing coming up frequently, um, that might just because it's the easy thing that people recognize as like, oh, that's design. You're asking me about aesthetics, so color.
I liked how you were able to get the feelings behind it because that was a little more expressive. You know, this needs more space. I don't know where to go. They don't necessarily know the nomenclature to use when they're talking design, but they were able to get their meaning across anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Does anyone have any design tips they would like to share for building beautiful websites? Okay, I don't see any more questions, so I think we could probably end early.
I've got an interesting tip for you. Let me turn the video back on. Is it back on? Oh, I guess I got to do that. Haha. Something curious has come up with that's a bit beyond the intersection of UX and beyond UI and beyond information architecture. If you combine all those things, there's still an interesting piece that's left out, which is the cognitive piece, which you're getting at, you're covering. Excuse me. It shows up with humans have a difficulty making decisions and choosing between things if they're isolated. So the thing you see by itself, you need a comparative. And Dan Ariely, I believe he's at Duke, his book, Predictably Irrational, describes a simple process where you put up two alternatives and you pollute one of them deliberately and give it a third. Because at first, the two alternatives is difficult to choose between. So this affects e-commerce, shopping cart behavior, and even selecting which courses do I sign up for, or I'm trying to sign up for sending my kids to science camp this summer, but they have this option or that option. The example Ariely gives in the book is, okay, you have the option of going to an all expense paid, a tour of Paris that comes with hotel and the tour package and free breakfast every day, or a tour of Rome with the same thing, hotel, free breakfast every day, and tour the city. Or you can get the tour of Rome with everything except the free breakfast every day. And just adding that extra piece gives enough contrast for people to say, oh, I can discriminate now. And they'll make a choice. And you start to move behavior beyond what is classic web e-commerce behavior, where people will go to the store, they go shopping, they fill up a shopping basket, and then they just abandon it and walk off. The only place people do that is online. Because sometimes there's, like, I'm just going to leave that there and I'll come look at it later. Maybe the price will change. I know I certainly do that on Amazon, and Amazon encourages me by telling me the price has changed. But I hear about other websites where it's like people get stuck in the process and choosing which camp do I go to, which camp do I send my kid to? Do I send them to the 5-day? Do I send them to the 7-day? Sometimes that's relative to which vacation these parents want to take, and that helps. But that's the comparative they have that's not on the screen. So thinking about not just the UX, but the cognitive UX beyond the information architecture, beyond the normal UI, user interface, cognitive stuff, but thinking, how are we helping a user make a decision to move, to finish the call to action we've asked them to finish, especially when it's commerce. It's very easy to get someone to finish signing up for their driver's license because they are invested in that process, even if it's done horribly. But when we talk about customers and clients asking, how do I get someone through the shopping cart? Are you giving them the right comparatives and not giving them too many? It just becomes noise.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to look at data that says, what is cognitively going on to help the user move through the process? Is a new strategy that's showing up, and it's literally the intersection of all three of these things, and it's not formally being discussed yet. It's a fascinating idea.
Interesting. Yeah.
Thank you, James. Thank you, James. Alexander, I have a question from Jechen, who is asking, what's the most challenging designing problem for library websites?
Mm. That's a loaded one. I don't know if I can answer that. I think from this study, what I saw in terms of aesthetic design problems is that it was unique for each of the websites. There was a wide range of, well, I mean, there was a wide range of design choices and designs in general about what people were doing, and no website was completely horrible. Every website was doing something right, and the opposite is true, where some websites were, um, yeah. Anyways, yeah, no one was doing the same problems consistently. I think one problem that sticks out to me, and this is just my example, is the Google Amazon problem, or not problem, but issue. Like we see that we have to make our search feel like these other search experiences, which is very challenging for libraries for many ways, and I'm not sure it really fits with what we're trying to do in the end.
Okay. Carol, you raised your hand. You have a question?
Hi, thanks. This is a lovely presentation. I'm
Thank
just
you.
curious, what motivated you to get into this in the first place? You may have talked about it, but I'm just curious if you have anything more to say about that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if, in my experience, what I've seen in a lot of the peer institutions when I was at Illinois, the people designing the websites weren't necessarily classically trained in design. Like it's a lot of librarians creating websites. So I guess my motivation was to try to educate the library and information science community on the importance of design and some of the basics. And also almost incite that need for education at an earlier age, like with the graduate students. Like maybe long-term goals would be like, maybe we should offer a design class in library and information science master's degree program. That would be awesome. But yeah, my motivation had to do with me seeing a lack of design education. And I think I'm a visually motivated person, and there's a lot of ugly websites out there that bother me.
I'm sure for presentation issues, having a good design knowledge would also be important as a librarian.
Yeah.
Just a practical point. Can I jump on the second question? This is a
Sure.
little bit off topic, but it's on topic. How did you find presenting went for you today, virtually? Anything that you learned? Anything you'd like to share with the logistics wise?
I think it went okay. Yeah, no major hiccups. I think just the general situation of the world was hard, made it hard to prepare for today, but that's not anything to do with Zoom or webcam. Awesome. Okay, well, thank you guys very much. I hope you have
Thank
a
you.
great rest of your webcamp.
Thank you.